I was 17 when I realized I could disappear in my own house and no one would notice. My name's Daniel Price. I'm 30 now. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, the kind of place where fighter jets roar overhead like clockwork and everyone knows someone who works at the base. Right Pat was the heartbeat of the town, and for families like mine, everything was about engineering, innovation, and sticking close to the Air Force pipeline. Both my parents were aerospace engineers. Mom did propulsion systems, Dad was deep into avionics, and they had a blueprint for success already laid out. My older brother, Nate, was the golden child from day one. Straight A's, obsessed with physics, built his own drone at 14. Every conversation at the dinner table somehow looped back to what Nate had accomplished that day. I wasn't like him. I liked tech, yeah, but not the kind you take apart. I liked thinking about how people used it, why one interface felt natural and another one clunky, why some products just clicked. I cared about design, user experience, behavior, but in our house, that stuff didn't count. If it didn't involve equations or CAD models, it was just decoration. When I built a concept for a school bus app that optimized routes for parents and drivers, Dad skimmed it, said it was neat, then went right back to reading Nate's robotics award letter out loud. I remember that exact moment, how I nodded like I didn't care, but inside, something split off and shut down. Nate's science fair boards got framed, mine got recycled. If I mentioned a business idea, I'd get the polite smile, followed by a pivot back to Nate's internship at some elite program I couldn't get into. The only one who treated my ideas like they mattered was Grandma Jean. She lived 3 blocks over and made these ugly little sculptures out of scrap metal in her garage. I'd walk over there after school, and she'd actually listen. Not just nod and say, "That's nice," but ask questions, challenge my thinking, make me sketch things out. She was the only one who didn't act like Nate was the sun and the rest of us were just orbiting. She'd say things like, "You don't have to build rockets to be brilliant, you just have to build something useful." I clung to that, because no matter how hard I tried, no matter what I made, it never lit up their faces the way Nate's work did. I wasn't invisible exactly, but I might as well have been. So I stopped trying to impress them, stopped talking about what I was working on, and started planning for the day I wouldn't have to live in anybody's shadow. By the time I hit high school, I knew I wasn't going to beat Nate at his own game, so I stopped trying. While he was racking up robotics trophies and getting flown out to engineering camps, I picked courses that leaned into industrial design and business. Things like human-centered systems, intro to CAD with a design focus, marketing analytics, stuff that made sense to me. I wasn't trying to build the rocket. I wanted to design the control panel people wanted to use. My brother called it surface-level thinking. I remember showing him my prototype for an ergonomic warehouse scanner, just a mock-up made from foam board and printed overlays. I was proud of it. His reaction? "This is cute," he said, flipping it over like it was a toy. "But it's useless if the firmware sucks. You should worry less about how it looks and more about how it works." He said that in front of our dad. And Dad just chuckled, not a word in my defense. So I kept my head down and learned what I needed. Enough coding to build front-end tools, enough systems logic to talk to the real engineers without sounding like a poser. I wasn't trying to be one of them. I just wanted to speak their language so I could actually build things that worked. Senior year, while Nate was choosing between MIT and Georgia Tech, I committed to the University of Cincinnati's Product Innovation Program. I didn't even bother telling the family until my acceptance letter came in the mail. Dad raised his eyebrows. "That's a creative route," he said. Mom followed with, "Well, it's good to have a plan B." Plan B? I didn't even bother answering. Let them believe whatever they wanted. Freshman year was rough. Everyone in my dorm was either chasing startup dreams or trying to transfer to bigger schools, but I stuck with it. Studied design thinking, UX flow, supply chain processes, took internships nobody else wanted, warehouse tech, retail inventory systems, third-party logistics. I wasn't chasing prestige. I was learning how broken half the world's back-end software really was. Sophomore year, I built a basic web tool for a local trucking company to manage routes and real-time driver check-ins. It wasn't sexy, but it worked. And the guys running dispatch called it a damn miracle. Word spread. I built another one for a courier group in Columbus. this time with a real-time tracking dashboard. I never told my family. Why would I? If it didn't involve an aerospace patent, they didn't care. Meanwhile, Nate was blasting out group texts about his first published paper and his work on some flight navigation system. Mom sent it to her coworkers. When I showed her the pilot dashboard I built for a same-day delivery startup, she tilted her head and said, "So, is this like an app for Uber drivers?" That was the tone. Every time. Like I was playing around while Nate was solving national defense problems. So I kept building and kept it quiet. I figured out that I didn't need them to believe in what I was doing. I just needed someone who got it. I worked part-time during the year and picked up contracts every summer. I studied logistics tech like it was religion, RFID systems, barcode scanning flows, cross-docking layouts, hardware-software interfacing. I didn't need to be an engineer. I needed to know how the systems failed, where people got stuck, and how to design tools that fixed it. It wasn't glamorous. I wasn't posting about it. But every solution I built shaved off minutes, saved companies money, solved a real problem. That was the difference between me and my brother. He built for theory. I built for people who had 5 minutes to get a job done and a busted interface that cost them 20. By the time I graduated, I'd launched 3 working tools, all still in use. Nothing viral. Nothing that hit TechCrunch. Just solid fixes for messy problems. And for once, I didn't care if anyone clapped. Because I was finally building a lane where no one else in my family was even looking. 1 week after graduation, I hitched a ride to a supply chain conference in Indianapolis. I wasn't a speaker, didn't have a booth, just paid for the student pass and showed up with a backpack full of mock-ups and a half-broken laptop. That's where I met Jenna. She was on a panel about warehouse automation, and I only went because the other sessions were full. She didn't sound like the rest of them. While everyone else was throwing around buzzwords, she was flat out roasting the software most companies used, called it bloated, clunky, designed by people who'd never spent a single day on a loading dock. Afterward, I found her by the coffee bar, nursing a half-melted iced latte. I introduced myself and said, "I think I've worked with everything you just dragged through the mud." She snorted. "Then you know I'm not wrong." We ended up sitting on the floor against a hallway wall for over an hour comparing notes. She was a mechanical engineer working at a mid-sized automation firm. Smart as hell, but frustrated. Said the software side was always holding back the hardware. I told her what I'd built so far. Simple tools, user-first logic, designed for speed over flash. She leaned in and said, "What if we built something from scratch? Something people actually liked using?" We started sketching ideas on hotel napkins that night. Nights and weekends, we worked out of her garage. Jenna handled the hardware interfacing, back-end structure, system logic. I focused on interface, user flow, use case testing. We fought constantly over button placement, color schemes, menu logic, but it worked because we both gave a damn. We called it PathForge. First, it was just a dashboard. Then it grew into a full warehouse ops suite. Task routing, real-time scan data, integrated error logging. We built it like people's jobs depended on it, because they did. We launched a demo site, emailed it to 24 logistics managers we'd met through past contracts. One replied, then another, then a third said, "You should talk to our VC partner." That's how we landed in a glass-walled office in Chicago 3 months later, pitching to a logistics-focused venture group with nothing but mock-ups, 2 working modules, and 1 shaky live demo. Halfway through the pitch, their director leaned back and said, "You built this with no funding?" "Just weekends and caffeine," I said. "They gave us $300,000 in seed money." Jenna cried in the elevator. I laughed like a lunatic. I didn't tell my family, not one word. I already knew how that would go. "Are you sure this is sustainable? Do either of you have a real plan? Why would a VC bet on a couple nobodies?" "No thanks, I didn't need that energy anywhere near this." But I did tell Grandma Jean. I showed her the demo in her living room, sitting on the same couch she used to fold laundry on when I was a kid. She watched quietly, nodding, clicking through the screens like she was testing it for real. She looked up. "How much equity did you give up?" I blinked. "Wait, how do you even know what that means?" "I dated a VC in the 80s, terrible kisser, smart with numbers. She grilled me for over an hour, asked better questions than the damn investors. Then she walked over to her bookshelf, pulled down a dusty envelope, and handed it to me. Inside was a cashier's check for 20 grand. "I believe in what you're doing," she said, "and if this doesn't work, you'll still owe me Thanksgiving dinners for the rest of your life." I hugged her harder than I'd ever let myself before. And right then, I made a decision. I didn't care if my family ever asked about what I was building, because I already had someone in my corner who never once needed convincing. We moved into a busted-out warehouse off Needmore Road, tucked behind a chain-link fence and 2 train lines that never shut up. Every time a freight engine rolled by, the windows rattled like they were about to cave in. That was our first office. There was no heat the first winter. Jenna worked in fingerless gloves. I kept a space heater under my desk that shorted out half the breakers if I plugged in the coffee maker too. There were rats. The Wi-Fi dropped if it rained, but we showed up every damn day. That first year nearly broke us. We pitched to over 30 companies. Most told us they already had in-house tools. Translation: clunky garbage duct taped together by someone's cousin in 2007. We pushed updates non-stop. I fixed bugs at 2 a.m. Jenna slept on the floor more than once. She'd wake up with her hair stuck to the carpet glue and just mutter, "We need a damn mattress in here." Still, we kept building. Then one day, a trucking firm out of Toledo, Midpoint Freight, emailed back. Their ops director said, "We're drowning in paperwork and temp drivers keep quitting over the scanning system." We drove up that weekend and demoed PathForge in a back room that smelled like hot dog water and axle grease. Jenna walked them through the back end while I let the drivers test the tablet UI. Their manager said, "If this thing doesn't crash tomorrow, we'll try it for a month." It didn't crash. 3 weeks in, their error rate dropped by 40%. We finally had a case study. We posted about it on our site. No fanfare, just numbers. No overpromising, just proof. That's when things started shifting. A warehouse group in Indiana called, then a small last-mile delivery firm in Nashville. We were still flying under the radar, but we were in motion. I didn't care that we weren't going viral. We were solving real problems. We hired our first 3 people, 2 developers and a guy named Kenny who had run dispatch for 15 years and didn't sugarcoat anything. "I don't care how pretty your screen is," he told me. "If it takes more than 2 taps, I'm not using it." I listened. Every damn time. We reinvested every dollar. No raises, no bonuses. We weren't pulling salaries yet. Every cent went back into the product. I still didn't say a word to my family, not even Grandma. We wanted something real before I opened that door again. Around that time, Nate posted on LinkedIn that he'd landed the lead software architecture role at Skytrack, biggest aerospace firm in the city. Massive contracts, government defense, cutting-edge design. He was barely 30 and already running teams. My mom group texted me and my dad the screenshot with 6 exclamation marks and said, "Our boy made it." She meant Nate. Obviously. I was sitting at the warehouse when I read it, eating cold instant noodles and trying to figure out why our auto-update system kept crashing 3rd-generation Android tablets. Jenna looked over and said, "You good?" "Yeah," I said. "Family stuff." She nodded and went back to her code. I didn't even bother telling her what it was about, because I knew the rules. Nate built things that flew through the sky. I built things that crawled through warehouses. His got headlines. Mine got forklift grease. But for the first time, I wasn't mad about it. We were building something that worked, something people depended on, something ours. And I wasn't about to let a single headline change what we were grinding for. 3 weeks after that cold noodles moment, we closed our Series A. $3 million. We moved out of the rat box and into a real office, a 3rd-floor space above an old tire shop, but it had real floors, working heat, and windows that didn't scream when the wind hit them. Jenna and I stared at the fresh-painted walls like we didn't trust them. We hired fast. Engineers, UI testers, account managers, customer support. 20 people, all in. Most had been burned by bloated tech companies and just wanted to build something clean, fast, and functional. And we were finally getting noticed. 4 regional logistics networks signed on over the next 6 months. These weren't mom-and-pop outfits anymore. These were mid-sized supply chains that moved actual weight, thousands of packages a day. They weren't interested in flash. They wanted speed, uptime, and a system that didn't need 3 weeks of training to operate. That's where we killed. We weren't flashy, but we were frictionless. A dispatcher could sit down, tap 3 buttons, and reassign 50 delivery points without breaking stride. Tech Week ran a full-page feature on us under the headline, The most boring startup you should be watching. Jenna loved that. She printed it and taped it to the break room fridge. I didn't send it to my parents, not because I didn't want them to see it, but because I already knew they'd skim it, maybe say something like, "That's nice, honey," and then go right back to asking if I'd seen Nate's latest TEDx talk. So I let it sit. One night, I was out late with one of our new partners, walking through their Dallas facility, when he mentioned a systems problem that caught my ear. Skytrack's warehouse is bleeding time during crossload. Their platforms can't talk to each other, he said. It's like they've got 5 systems duct taped together. I froze. You mean Skytrack, the aerospace firm? I asked. Yeah, their logistics division. You didn't know? I didn't, but I should have. The next day I pulled their name up in our database. Sure enough, their support tools were ancient and they were actively losing smaller contracts to competitors with cleaner platforms. I didn't say anything for a week, just watched. Checked what systems they used, dug into the known gaps, then cross-checked those against what we'd already solved. PathForge fit almost perfectly. So, when our investors brought up acquisition targets during a strategy session, I wasn't shocked to hear Skytrack's name hit the list. One of the board members said, "They're ripe for disruption. Their logistics arm's bleeding talent, and their internal tooling's a mess. We could either license to them or buy and fold it in." I leaned back in my chair and nodded. My pulse didn't move, because I was ready for this. After the meeting, Jenna cornered me in the hallway. "That's your brother's company, right?" "He's in software architecture," I said. "Not logistics." She raised an eyebrow. "Still, you cool with this?" "Completely." And I was, because we didn't force Skytrack onto the list. Their own failures did that. They had the same chance we did to build something lean and smart, and they chose complexity. We didn't. A week later, our COO handed me a sealed folder and said, "Board's approved initial contact with Skytrack and 2 others. Start putting together integration notes, quietly." I took it home, put it on my desk, didn't open it. Instead, I called Grandma Jean. She was in the middle of slicing onions when she picked up. "Hey kid, you sound wired," I told her. Everything. I told her we were considering acquiring Skytrack's logistics division, that it was real, that it was happening, that Nate worked there, and it didn't matter. She didn't flinch. Instead, she laughed and said, "Well, Easter's going to be interesting this year." That caught me off guard. "Why?" "Because Easter's in 2 weeks, and you're going to be sitting across the table from your brother while holding the receipt to his entire back end." "I hadn't even thought of that," she cackled. "Bring rolls." 2 days before the press release, I packed a fresh button down, deleted 3 draft texts to my parents, and drove home. I wasn't nervous about the deal. I was ready. What I wasn't ready for was the look on Nate's face when he found out. I parked 2 blocks from my parents' place and just sat in the car, hands on the steering wheel, watching the wind push trash down the curb. 2 days until the press release. I'd already signed off on the language. PathForge was approaching Skytrack, formally, as a potential acquisition target. We were one of 3 companies in play, but the board liked Skytrack best, mostly because of how bad their logistics side had gotten and how clean our integration would be. It was real now. My name would be on the contact document sent to their executive team. And Nate's title? VP of Software Architecture. Not just some mid-level guy anymore. He was the one they'd loop into discussions. I made sure the board knew. "I should disclose something," I said at the end of the meeting that week. "My brother works at Skytrack. He's VP of Software Architecture." There was a short pause. Then one board member, Shane, shrugged and said, "Okay, just keep it clean." Another added, "As long as he's not on the procurement side, it's not a conflict." That was it. No drama, no concern, just another bullet point on a checklist. Which is exactly what I wanted. After the meeting, I sent Grandma Jean a text. Me. Confirmed. Skytrack's getting the letter Monday. Grandma. Better bring your appetite to Easter, kid. I swear she lived for this. I, on the other hand, was about 2 notches short of puking. Not because I wasn't sure, but because everything I'd worked for, quietly, steadily, for years, was about to explode into the one place I'd always been invisible. My parents' house, Easter lunch, the whole family would be there. Nate, loud and polished. My mom floating from kitchen to table, pretending not to hover. Dad, phone in hand, probably texting work during grace. A couple cousins. My aunt with the raspy voice who always asked if I was still doing computers. And me, about to drop the biggest bomb I'd ever held. I didn't want drama. I didn't even want revenge. I just wanted to walk in, be myself, and not flinch. The morning of, I ironed my shirt twice, brought fresh rolls, showed up on time. Nate rolled in late, like always, grinning like he owned the damn street, girlfriend on his arm, some marketing exec type with bright nails and louder shoes. He made sure everyone knew he'd just come from the gym, like the sweat made him more impressive. I didn't say a word, just nodded and helped Grandma Jean carry the sweet potatoes to the table. She leaned in as we passed each other in the hallway and whispered, "Buckle up." That was the only warning I got, and I could feel it coming, like the pressure drop before a storm. All I had to do was get through lunch. And then, the press release would go out Monday morning. Once it hit, it'd hit fast. Our name, our intent, our metrics, all on the table. Skytrack's problems, everyone would see them. And Nate, he'd be forced to realize exactly who he'd been brushing off for the last 10 years. But until then, I had to play it cool, smile, pass the ham, keep my hands from shaking. This wasn't just about business. This was about walking into the lion's den, full grown, and knowing I didn't owe anyone an explanation. 2 more days. That was it. Then the whole game would flip. Nate dropped his sunglasses on the dining table like he was arriving at a red carpet event instead of Easter lunch. "Sorry, folks," he said, voice raised like he was talking to a packed auditorium. "Traffic was hell, but hey, we made it." He kissed Mom on the cheek, tossed his blazer on the back of a dining chair, and motioned toward the tall woman behind him in bright heels. "This is Tessa," he announced, marketing director at Merge Tech. Just launched a campaign that tripled click-through rates. Tessa gave a sharp nod like she'd just accepted an award. I stayed seated, nodded. She didn't look at me. Nate didn't either. He slid into the seat across from me, already halfway through a story, before his ass hit the cushion. So Skytrack's been a mess, right? But I got brought in to rewrite the core system. The back end was spaghetti code. We had 4 tools competing for the same data streams. A disaster. He laughed like it was a punchline, like he wasn't part of the same mess 6 months ago. But I started a complete overhaul. Microservices architecture, simplified the sync layers. We're going to be back on top in a year, Max. Mom looked impressed. She always did. Dad asked what a microservice was. Nate explained it like he was on a talk show. Tessa dropped a "that's hot" into the middle of his sentence, and he gave her a wink. I chewed my food and didn't say a word. Then Grandma Jean cleared her throat. She wasn't subtle, never had been. She set down her fork with a clink, wiped her mouth like she was preparing for a courtroom cross-examination, and asked, "So, Daniel, how's Pathforge doing these days?" That was all it took. The second she said it, Nate's whole body shifted. His smirk dipped, then came back sharper. "Oh yeah," he said, waving a hand. "Pathforge, that's your app thing, right? What was it again? Warehouse dashboards?" I met his eyes. "Integrated logistics systems," I said. "We focus on human-centric tools for warehouse and fleet operations." Nate chuckled. "So basically a prettier clipboard." Tessa laughed like she understood. "Something like that," I said, cool as I could manage. But Grandma wasn't done. She turned to Nate and tilted her head, real casual. "Didn't I just read that Skytrack's logistics division got acquired?" Nate raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, Monday apparently, some private group. Weird timing." She nodded, took another bite of sweet potatoes, then said it like she was talking about the weather. "Isn't that Daniel's company?" The silence was instant, like someone killed the power in the whole house. Nate froze. Tessa blinked. Mom's fork hovered midair. Dad looked between us like he missed a step in the conversation. Then all eyes landed on me. I didn't smile, didn't gloat. I just said, "Yeah, that's us." For a second, no one spoke. Then Mom said, too fast, Wait, what do you mean that's you?" I looked at her. "Pathforge. We're one of the 3 entities behind the acquisition. The lead, actually." Nate pushed back from the table, hands in his lap like he wasn't sure whether to flip the table or just stand up and leave. "You've got to be kidding me. I'm not. You've been, what, building this in secret?" "No," I said. "You just weren't paying attention?" Dad sat back like he was watching a car crash. Mom's mouth opened, then closed again. Tessa tried to whisper something to Nate, but he stood up fast. "This is bullshit." He didn't wait for a response. He just turned and walked out. Loud, fast, no jacket, no goodbye. Tessa scrambled after him in her heels, muttering, "Nate, wait," like that was gonna help. The front door slammed. No one moved for a full 30 seconds. Then Grandma Jean picked up the basket of rolls, passed them to me, and said, "Hope he left some ham." And that was it. That was the moment the damn table turned. Not with a shout, not with a fight. Just silence, truth, and one perfectly timed question. I found him out back on Grandma Jean's porch swing, shoulders hunched, eyes fixed on the yard, like the grass owed him answers. The door creaked behind me, but he didn't turn. "Didn't expect that," he muttered. I didn't sit right away. Just stood there, hands in my pockets, letting the swing creak under him. "You good?" I asked. He blew out a laugh through his nose. "Seriously?" I stepped closer, leaned against the railing. "I didn't do it to screw you, Nate." He looked at me then, finally, like he was trying to decide whether to believe that. "You really expect me to think this wasn't personal?" "It was business," I said flat. "Your company's logistics wing is broken. Ours works. That's it." His jaw twitched. "You could have told me." "No," I said, "I couldn't." "Why the hell not?" I sat down across from him, on the opposite side of the swing. "Because every time I brought up anything I was building, you either laughed or dismissed it. So, yeah, I kept it quiet, because I knew what I had, and I wasn't going to waste time convincing you." He looked away again. "You built a whole company behind my back." "No," I said. "I built it in plain sight. You just didn't care enough to look." That landed. I saw it in the way his shoulders sagged a little. For a minute, neither of us said anything. Then he ran a hand through his hair and said, "I honestly don't get how you did it." I let the silence sit. I wanted him to feel it, all of it. "I studied the gaps," I said. "I didn't chase flashy, I chase function. I built for the guys who don't have time to deal with bloated systems and 10-step processes. While you were rewriting back-end scripts, I was sitting in dispatch rooms watching what actually broke." His mouth pulled tight. "I thought you were just doing freelance junk." "Because that's what you wanted to think," I said. "You never once asked what I was really building." He looked down at his hands. "I didn't think I needed to." Exactly. That one word hit harder than anything else I could have said. The screen door creaked open behind us, and Tessa stepped out, heels clicking softly on the porch. "I read about Pathforge this morning," she said. "Didn't realize you were that Daniel?" Nate flinched. Tessa kept her tone neutral, but she wasn't clueless. "There's a feature on Tech Week. You should have seen the comments. People love it. Even some of our team was sharing it around Slack." She looked at Nate. "Did you know?" He didn't answer, just stared at the floorboards. She took the hint and turned back toward the door. "I'll be inside." After she was gone, he looked at me again. "I thought I was ahead." "You were," I said. "At least, that's what everyone told you." He looked like he wanted to argue, but there was nothing left to defend. I stood up, stepped off the porch. "Deal goes public in 2 days. You'll have decisions to make." He didn't ask what kind. He already knew. Before I walked back inside, I turned once more. "I didn't build this to beat you, Nate. I built it because you never thought I could." And then I left him sitting there, swing creaking in the quiet, finally realizing he'd been facing the wrong direction the whole time. The press release hit Monday morning at 7. By 10, it was all over LinkedIn. By noon, Jenna was handing out donuts while our inbox filled with congrats and media requests. I kept refreshing the internal portal, watching Skytrack's teams log in one by one. By Friday, my parents called. "We'd like to come see the office," Mom said, like she was asking about a dentist appointment. I said sure, no need to make it a thing. They showed up the following Tuesday. Mom wore heels. Dad wore a blazer like he was meeting a senator. I met them at the front and walked them through reception, past the big steel sign that read, "Pathforge Technologies, bold, clean, ours." They both stopped. "This is impressive," Mom said quietly. I didn't say anything, just kept walking. The office was humming, desks full, people moving fast. Kenny cracked a joke as we passed and made Dad laugh. Jenna popped out of a meeting, shook both their hands and said, "Daniel built the core client flow himself, still the highest rated UX in the system." Mom blinked. You did that? Yeah, I said. That's my part. She didn't hide her surprise. We stepped into our glass-walled conference room. Awards lined the back wall. Tech Week feature, best startup in logistics. UI design for enterprise systems. I'd forgotten how many we had until I saw Mom's eyes scanning them. I don't understand, she finally said. Why didn't you ever tell us all this? I took a breath, sat down across from them. Because you never asked, I said. Every time I tried to bring something up, it got compared to Nate, or brushed off. So I stopped sharing. She opened her mouth, but I cut her off before she could soften it. I didn't want support out of obligation. I wanted to succeed without having to prove I was worth listening to. Dad sat forward, elbows on his knees. He looked older in our space, quieter. We just always thought Nate's path was more direct, tangible. Engineering made sense to us. We assumed you were figuring it out. I was, I said, just not your way. There was a long pause, not hostile, just honest. He looked at the floor and said, we were wrong about that. I didn't need a speech, didn't want one. I just nodded. I never needed applause, I said. I just needed room. Mom ran her fingers across the edge of the conference table. She looked around again, slower this time, like she was seeing it differently. So, what happens next? We're scaling, integrating Skytrack's logistics tools into our platform, launching the new rollout Q4, bringing over some of their team, including Nate if he wants it. Dad raised his eyebrows. You'd hire him? We're not children, I said. He's good at what he does, and I don't hold grudges. I just remember. That landed. I could see it. We stood up to leave. Mom turned to me, softer now. We're proud of you, Daniel. I know, I said. Now. She hugged me. It wasn't long, but it was real. Dad patted my back the way dads do when they don't quite know what to say, but want to say something anyway. Before they left, Mom looked back one more time at the Pathforge sign. You really built all this? Yeah, I said. From nothing. And for the first time in my life, I could tell. They finally saw it. 1 year later, Nate and I pulled into the driveway at the same time. It felt weird at first, us walking up the steps together, both holding side dishes, like we hadn't spent half our lives talking past each other. He had the green bean casserole. I brought fresh bread from this bakery near the office. We didn't say much at the door, just knocked once, walked in like we belonged. Because now, we did. He still worked at Pathforge, head of automation integration. He stayed after the acquisition, chose to. He was good at it too. Built out the full handoff system between our logistics suite and the legacy robotics teams. His code made our tools faster. My interface made his logic usable. For the first time, our work actually fit. We'd presented together at the National Supply Chain Expo last month. Packed room. People stayed after to ask about our workflows. I handled design strategy. He handled system ops. No posturing, no one up. It worked. Mom greeted us like royalty when we walked in. Dad pulled out chairs before we even set down our dishes. No weird comments. No awkward silences. Just normal. And when I started telling Uncle Ray about our new pilot with Northern Freight, nobody cut me off. Nobody changed the subject. In fact, they listened, asked questions. Not fake interest questions either, real ones. No one called it your app anymore. It was the company. Grandma Jean was already seated at the head of the table, her legs up on a footrest and a blanket draped over her lap. Slower now, a little quieter, but sharp as ever. As I passed the bread basket, she raised one eyebrow at me. Still making headlines, Mr. Pathforge? I smirked. Only the boring kind. Nate leaned over with a grin. The profitable kind. We both laughed, so did she. She looked at us like she'd been waiting years for that moment. Probably had. She always knew. And now, finally, so did everyone else.